Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. This video is nonprofit and educational and thus tips the balance in favor of fair use. Claiming any copyright infringement would be false and thus illegal. Oprah's question was specific. Do, present tense, not past tense as in did. Do some of the dolphins captured there end up in theme parks here in the United States? O'Barry is being dishonest at worst, misleading at best. After exclaiming, "Oh, yeah," O'Barry proceeds to describe dolphin trainers in the film capturing dolphins as though they are from the U.S. They are not. Every one of the trainers in that film is Asian. He insists that if the dealers were to leave Taiji, the fishery would probably shut down. It's a message O'Barry harps on interview after interview. Listen to what he says first to Mike Huckabee and later to Larry King.
And so they're driven in the cove is sealed. If there's a capture taking place, you'll see about 30 dolphin trainers who select the best for themselves. And I think that's the economic underpinning of the slaughter.
Can you briefly say what they do to them?
Well, they capture them. They're captured and sent to different dolphinariums around the world, and the ones that are not selected are slaughtered.
Now listen to Rick O'Barry and actor Ben Stiller on the same Larry King show. Mr. Stiller was so sold on the Cove's illusion that he describes feeling guilty for having swam with dolphins at parks in Jamaica and Mexico, neither of which have Japanese dolphins. Also, listen to what he believes he can do to help the situation.
And, you know, you talk about these dolphinariums. I mean, literally, in the last 2 or 3 years, I got 2 young kids. I've been in Jamaica. I've taken my kids to swim with dolphins. I've done it in Mexico. And then you see this movie, and immediately you feel so guilty. You feel so bad because you realize, okay, I want my kids to have that experience, but not at the expense of the lives of these dolphins and the humane treatment of them. And in the movie, you see how in this cove, you know, the dolphinariums come to buy the dolphins, and the ones that aren't bought are killed. And so immediately, you know, you think, what can I do? Well, the first thing I can do is not go and support this.
Well, the first thing I can do is not go and support this. So Mr. Stiller now believes that by boycotting swim programs, he will start saving dolphin lives in Japan. Now listen to the simplistic solution O'Barry chimes in with after Stiller's statement.
You know, you think, what can I do? Well, the first thing I can do is not go and support this.
That's the solution to the problem. Don't buy a ticket.
Don't buy a ticket? Really? That's the solution? If everyone in the world would refuse to patronize dolphin parks, Japanese fishermen will stop hunting dolphins for meat? By eliminating 1% of the equation, the other 99% will magically dissolve? Does he really believe that? No, he doesn't. How do we know this? Because in the Cove, O'Barry contradicts his own theory. It's a bit of a paradox, really. The first 20 minutes of the documentary are spent building a case that aquariums are at the foundation of the dolphin slaughter. Yet much later in the film, a 32-second segue introduces a different theory as to what motivates the fishermen to kill dolphins.
We asked the Taiji fishermen if we could subsidize this activity. In other words, if you leave the boats tied up at the dock, we'll pay you the same amount of money you would have made killing dolphins in Taiji. They got back to us and said, it's not about money, it's about pest control. Pest control. In other words, they're being told by the government that the dolphin are eating too much fish in the ocean.
So O'Barry is telling us two conflicting theories in the same film. On the one hand, he is telling us that aquariums and their money are the driving force behind the killing. On the other hand, he claims that even if activists paid the fishermen even money to not kill dolphins, the fishermen would still be compelled to exterminate them for purposes of pest control. The obvious difference is that the first theory gets a whole lot more airplay than the other. The filmmakers only employ the pest control clip to segue from dolphin hunts to the topic of overfishing by Japan. The film then spends 3.5 minutes covering the very grievous reality that humans are depleting fish stocks at unsustainable rates. The concept of dolphin killing as pest control isn't some recent discovery of O'Berry's. It has been at the core of the Japanese fishermen's philosophy, and they have been freely admitting it for decades. Look at this 31-year-old National Geographic magazine, which features the article entitled "The Trouble with Dolphins." A picture of a bloody bay with dead dolphins in Iki Island, Japan, has a caption with the fishermen's self-described motive. The fishermen say the act was one of desperation. They lose more than $30 million a year because the animals compete with them in catching cuttlefish and yellowtail. One man who was there at Iki in 1979 is filmmaker and pioneering dolphin activist Hardy Jones. He's been documenting the dolphin hunt consistently for the past 30 years. This is his film footage used by Jacques Cousteau in a 1982 documentary.
In the waters off Iki Island in Japan, it is the incomprehensible human intellect that makes its mark. To Iki fishermen, dolphins are the gangsters of the sea, thieving the waters of catch. Each year, the angry islanders drive the mammals to the shallows, drag them on the beach, stab them, then let them bleed to death. In 1 year alone, 2,000 dolphins died. Yet still the catch dwindles.
The scapegoat complex. A child breaks a vase and blames the cat. A nation overfishes and blames the dolphin.
Listen to an excerpt from Mr. Jones's documentary, The Dolphin Defender, which aired on PBS's Nature program in 2005. Here he describes his experiences on Iki Island, Japan, in 1979 and 1980.
On a small island off Japan, fishermen were killing hundreds of dolphins they believed were taking their fish. As soon as I could, I was on a plane headed for Iki, Japan. Thus began a long and complex relationship with the fishermen of the island. I argued the problem had more to do with overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction. We disagreed, but a friendly dialogue had begun. My hopes that dialogue might lead to an end of the killing were shattered the following year, when I returned to the island and witnessed a scene of unspeakable horror. More than 1,000 dolphins dead on the beach. The rest awaiting their fate in the shallows. I did the only thing I could. I filmed the event, vowing I would never forget the dolphins that were dying that day.
Hardy Jones was actually featured briefly in the Cove in a simple 1-minute clip explaining that today Iki Island has no more dolphins. Not much face time for the man truly responsible for, quote, getting the word out. Isn't it a little odd that the man who originally broadcast the reality of pest control was not given credit for it, but rather took a back seat to Rick O'Berry, a relative newcomer on the Japanese scene? By the way, in his documentary, Hardy Jones was much more straightforward about the reality of the dry fisheries relationship to aquariums. Though he's no fan of captivity, Mr. Jones is quite clear about where the dolphins end up.
These dolphins will be trained and then shipped all over Asia. To China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, the Philippines, French Polynesia, and elsewhere.
In the end, people watching The Cove don't remember the 32-second segue offering a blurb about fishermen regarding dolphins as pests so much as they remember the 20 minutes of film dedicated to the incrimination of dolphin parks. Having thoroughly reviewed the available data, it is easy to form the opinion that the producers of The Cove made a deliberate and concerted effort to deceive the public by implicating dolphin facilities as the principal motivation behind the drive fisheries in Japan. As you have seen, this accusation is demonstrably false. They claim aquariums helped create the slaughter, despite the killing predating the dolphin parks by 350 years. That supplying aquariums is the fishermen's first purpose, when only a handful of fishermen in one town sell 0.7% of the nation's catch. That most of the dolphin parks around the world acquire their dolphins from Japan, when in fact Asia is their only active market. And finally, though they consistently claim aquariums to be the economic underpinning of the slaughter, pest control has long been the fishermen's chief concern. Through the documentary itself, countless interviews and appearances, the filmmakers appear dishonestly bent on transforming the public's enjoyment of a dolphin show or enthusiasm for a dolphin swim into an overwhelming sense of guilt for having patronized an activity they falsely claim is responsible for dolphin bloodbaths in Japan. Regardless of one's personal view about the keeping of animals in captivity, opinions simply do not change the stark reality that dolphins and whales continue to be killed by Japanese fishermen despite the harsh glare of the world's spotlight.